The House Where the Camera Never Blinks, a semi-documentary saga about Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo, a love that turned into complicity, and a system that took far too long to hear its own warnings. Prologue: the click everyone heard. In some houses, curtains aren't lowered for coziness, but so daylight won't interfere with the ritual. A camera stands on a tripod like a mute candle and does not blink. Its glass eye watches two people learn to say "we" so loudly that "I" becomes invisible. Outside, there are postcards and wedding ribbons, in the paper's playful nicknames, as if evil can be flattened into glossy format. Inside, there is a script where love is used as a rope, and somewhere not far from those smiles lies water that keeps concrete better than people keep secrets. Part 1. Two childhoods, seeds sown before the meeting. Paul, the golden boy, with a cold-center suburban Toronto, teaches you to be pleasant. Paul learned the main lesson: early impression is currency. Teachers remember a charming, confident young man. Friends remember someone who could put you in your place with a joke. Inside, there was a pull toward control, a condescending smirk at other people's boundaries, a thrill about how far you can go. Later psychiatrists would attach strict labels: pronounced narcissism, an empathy deficit, sadistic coloring of sexual fantasies, a high score on psychopathy checklists. In adolescence, it looked simpler: the knack for getting what you want, discounts, favor, access anywhere, in a shop, in class, in relationships. Karla, the perfect daughter for whom love, consent, St. Catharines raises tidy girls. Karla could read other people's expectations and took joy in meeting them. Working at a veterinary clinic taught her two skills: procedural discipline and a very particular composure, the calm you hold beside another creature's pain. That calm would become both her quiet tool and her quiet undoing. The ability not to flinch where no should be said. Her inner motto: be needed and be perfect. She wasn't without will. She was steerable like a river whose banks have been engineered. Part 2. The chemistry of lock-in. When we becomes a laboratory, they met and instantly found convenient roles. He was the director. She, the implementer. He wrote the rules. She kept them. He dominated. She proved herself worthy. Their intimacy quickly turned into a lab of control. Tests, gifts, proofs. Love became the word that covered experiments. The camera entered their domestic life not by accident, but as a technological extension of power. The frame recorded not events, but hierarchy. Part 3. Before we, a city walking in shadow. Even before Karla and Paul began, fear was already pacing the east end of Toronto, under a newspaper nickname, the Scarborough Rapist. Women learned to carry keys between their fingers. Composite sketches hung at bus stops. Patrols didn't sleep, but the case was splintered across units. Paul had already given a DNA sample once. That paper, traveling through long corridors of labs and agencies, moved slower than a predator on the street. In reports, this would be called falling between seams. In life, it had a simpler name: someone didn't make it in time. Part 4. Christmas rewritten as an accident. The Homolka house smelled of pine and baking. On such nights, it feels shameful to utter dosage and sedative. But where love is replaced by obedience, medical language turns readily into a tool. That night, Karla's younger sister, Tammy, died. Officially, accident. The marks on her face were explained with frightening haste. Holidays don't like suspicion, and the system wanted to believe. Truth doesn't ask about calendars, though. Later, when the context is uncovered, it will be clear. This was not a mistake, but an act hidden under the blanket of a family story. Part 5. Between two photographs. Leslie and the Wedding, June 1991. A girl named Leslie doesn't make it to her door. Morning brings a decision that should not exist in human speech. Saw, pour, weigh down, sink. Concrete is the myth of finality. Pretending you can force the world not to find. On the same day, divers haul heavy blocks from the water. A horse-drawn carriage rolls away from a church. White dress, white tuxedo, lacquered hooves. Two pictures from one day like lightning that lights two horizons at once. One event you want to forget. The other you want to show everyone. Together they form an indictment of a whole culture of gloss, where crime hides more easily beneath a smile. Part 6. A map, a parking lot, a girl named Kristen, spring 1992. A Catholic school, an emptying parking lot, a woman with a map. I'm lost. Could you help? Kristen bends down, and the script, honed like an algorithm, runs. Suddenness, threat, a car, a house. The interval between the abduction and the discovery is a black hole of time. When the body is found, someone has tried to erase it. That's the favorite logic of controllers. If you wash away traces, then it didn't happen. But truth isn't only in traces. It's also in coincidences, habits, phone calls, routes, and in what does not change about people who do not stop. Part 7. Jane Doe, a life given a textbook name. There is another story, officially called Jane Doe, a survivor pushed into unconsciousness, whose call for help was cancelled when she seemed better. For statistics, that's anonymity. In law, it protects identity. For conscience, it's shame. Her episodes are evidence not only of the pair's malice, but of the fragility in our reflex that, if no one died, it's okay. It isn't. Injustice lives even where no one is killed. Part 8. Cracks inside the facade. By late 1992, violence returns to its source, to the house where the camera was always ready. Paul hits Karla. Bruises make reality sharper than any hypothesis. Her parents practically tear their daughter out of his hands. Almost simultaneously, the DNA answer arrives, the one trudging through the bureaucratic corridors. The puzzle clicks from two sides at once, at home and at police HQ. The arrest looks inevitable, like January snow, just as late. Part 9. The house doesn't answer at once. The search, the ceiling, the tapes. A search is a conversation with things. Walls reply in the language of dust and cavities. The first warrants are restrained. No opening up the structure. The most important items aren't hidden deeply, but cleverly in places procedure can't reach. The tapes surface not with the crown, but the defense, and that route will change the moral geometry of the case. Prosecutors strike a deal with Karla without having seen the central visual evidence of her role. Legally, that will be fine. Morally painful. Part 10. A deal with the devil. The cost of cooperation. Canadian law recognizes the logic of plea bargaining. Some truths are far harder to extract without those who were inside the crimes. Karla is offered 12 years for full cooperation and testimony against Paul. When tapes later show more than expected, society says, too cheap. But law runs on rails, not asphalt. Once the train of the deal has left, you can't move it to a new track just because someone found stronger sleepers afterward. Her release 12 years later becomes not a period, but a long argument. What is fair? Part 11. Paul's Trial. A Country Learns to Breathe. The trial lasts weeks. Each day the press bangs into publication bans. Jurors listen the way people listen when made to stare into someone else's dark. Karla testifies against Paul. The defense tries to divide guilt into portions, as if evil were sold by weight. On September 1, 1995, The verdict sounds like a heavy lid slamming shut. Guilty. Life with parole eligibility far away. Soon after comes dangerous offender status, which effectively plucks the word hope from his calendar. It feels as if the country takes its first full breath. Part 12. After. The borders of punishment and the borders of memory. Karla completes her sentence, changes names, tries to shed an old skin. Every attempt to live like everyone else turns into a debate. Does she have the right? Paul remains where the law likes to keep those whose fantasies do not run dry. Behind walls. Every bid for parole pressure tests society. Psychiatrists note persistent, deviant drives. Low insight. Risk and denials stack up in a neat pile. Part 13. Biographies of those whose names matter more than headlines. Tammy Homolka, on 15, the younger one. Trusting. A homebody. Around her the world felt safer. Her death is the central tier in trust between the portrait of an ideal family and a reality that people initially turned away from. It's the core of pain for anyone who believed relatives are, by definition, a shield. Leslie Mahaffy, to 14, a teenager with plans that did not include someone else's house and someone else's rules. Her story is about how quickly a life can be ruined by an outside director. Just one meeting at a threshold. The concrete blocks did less to hide the crime than to enshrine a cult of finality. Memory does not drown. Kristen French, 15. Brave and attentive. The kind of person who would stop to help with a map. Her story is a warning about empty parking lots and also about the power of a community's response. After her disappearance, police coordinated, towns pulled together, and school corridors turned into corridors of remembrance. Jane Doe, a name from a textbook, so that her own can be kept. For society, a reminder. Survival is not always victory. It too requires care and respect. In the criminal history, her episodes became the footbridge. The investigation crossed from suspicion to recognizing scale. Part 14. A chronology without omissions. Expanded, month-by-month feel. 1987-1990. A series of street attacks in Toronto's East End. The nickname, Scarborough Rapist. November 1990. Paul's DNA is taken. Interagency slowness stretches analysis into a long corridor. December 24, 1990. Tammy's death, initially processed as an accident. Spring 1991. The pair tighten their isolation from the world. Confidence grows. Rituals of control multiply. June 1991. Leslie disappears. June 29th. Concrete blocks are recovered. The same day, Paul and Karla marry. April 1992. Kristen is abducted. April 30th. Her body is discovered. A multi-agency task force expands the radius of checks. November-December 1992. Violence inside the pair intensifies. Karla appears at work injured. Her parents intervene. January-February 1993. The DNA matches finally land for the earlier spate of assaults. February 17th. Paul is arrested. Spring-Summer 1993. The cooperation agreement with Karla, 12 years. Sometime later, the defense ends up with tapes the Crown will only see afterward. 1994-1995. Preparation and trial. Publication bans to protect jury impartiality. September 1st, 1995. Guilty verdict with life imprisonment. Later designation as a dangerous offender. 2005. Karla's release after serving her term. Public outcry swells and ebbs. 2010s. Periodic flare-ups of interest in her private life. Political debates about the limits of reintegration. 2020s. Routine denials of Paul's parole. Public debates about transfers between security levels and how risk is weighed. Part 15. Psychological profiles. Expanded. Paul Bernardo. The director of power. Cognitive core. A felt right to dispose of others as natural. Empathy is for the weak. Affective palate, a mixture of arousal from control and devaluation of the object. Behavioral pattern, from impulsive street attacks to technological fixation, video as extension of ownership, to designing scenarios where the point is not sex, but power. Communication strategies, a charming mask, normality, jokes used as a tool of dominance, feedback accepted only as confirmation of rank. Risk module, persistent deviant fantasies, rationalization, denial of responsibility, predictors of high reoffense risk in the absence of external barriers. Karla Homolka, complicity as a love strategy, cognitive core, love consent, morality procedure, affective palate, fear of losing ideal status in the eyes of the dominant partner, relief from a properly executed instruction. Behavioral pattern, transferring cold caregiving skills, dosages, protocols, instruments, into criminal logistics, moving from observer to participant, smoothing after effects, from domestic excuses to concealment. Danger conditions, dyads where morality is outsourced to the partner, to rules, to procedure. Rehabilitation potential, possible only if the original dependence is dismantled and an internal moral matrix is built, difficult, but not theoretically impossible. Part 16, where the system failed, in detail, late DNA linkage. The sample existed, but the process crawled. Lesson, create an end-to-end digital bus between field units and forensic labs. Cases with repeating attack patterns must receive maximum priority. An accident where there was a crime. When a family narrative is too tidy, the protocol of doubt must kick in. Mandatory toxicology, minimal deference to familial pressure, second opinions from independent pathologists. Warrants drawn too narrowly. A search is not demolition, but it's not a tour either. If there are grounds to believe media are hidden in structural voids, warrants should anticipate access to those voids. A deal without the full evidentiary picture. Plea bargaining is lawful, but high-harm cases deserve a double threshold. A. Formal legality, and B. Substantive sufficiency of what the Crown verifiably knows at the moment of the deal, with transparent reasoning for society and victims. The media label Ken and Barbie, a light nickname with heavy consequences. It created the illusion of symmetry and romanticized the banal mechanics of domination. In such cases, the press should practice conscious de-glamorization. Part 17, Law and Process. Why it unfolded exactly this way. Disclosure. Canadian procedure emphasizes the Crown's duty to disclose to the defense in good faith. The problem here, at the time of the plea, some key materials were effectively out of the Crown's reach. Formally, the law was met. Substantively, public fairness took a blow. Publication bans. To protect juries from poisoning, courts often restrict detail. This saves trials but seeds a public feeling of, "We weren't told," which then detonates when bans lift. Punishment and the dangerous offender. This status isn't a symbol. It's a legal instrument recognizing high risk and allowing incarceration conditions that minimize the chance of reoffense. Part 18. 3 lenses on one story. Human. A story about codependence where love became the geometry of submission. The good person is the one who says no in time. Institutional. A lesson about data speed. Biology must not lose to paperwork. Also about how crucial cross-city and cross-unit through cases are. Media. A warning to the press. A cute name kills the weight of meaning. The brighter the nickname, the darker the shadow it casts over the facts. Part 19. Scenes that could have witnessed literary vignettes, the Homolka kitchen. Steam on glass, the glow of garlands, the clink of plates. In such quiet, every footstep is audible. Banality becomes accessory when it refuses to speak. The basement ceiling. A gap between joists space where you put "not for others' eyes." A detective on a stepladder senses it. One more reach, and the truth will drop into his hands. A school corridor. Posters remain, class photos, other people's backpacks. Along the wall candles. A community learns to voice grief, so it doesn't calcify into whispers. A courtroom. Lamps hum. Papers rustle. Words are chosen with care. Even so, the truth cannot be fully said, only endured. Part 20. What we should do. Years later, trust the unease. When an accident story is too neat, it is probably false. Build bridges between data. DNA profiles, behavioral signatures, calls, and cameras. These are not 4 binders, but one graph. Teach no. In families, schools, congregations, everywhere. The right to refuse is not rudeness, it's safety training. Speak of victims humanly, not as part of a case, but as people with plans and favorite foods. Epilogue. Air after the tape. When the camera goes dark, the room takes its air back. At first it tastes bitter. Too much went unheard for too long. This is not a tale of a monster and a princess, not black paint versus white. It is a story about the chemistry of codependence, the seduction of control, and how quickly we becomes an alibi once boundaries are erased. It is about a system that can punish, but rarely arrives in time. About a city that learned not only to fear, but to close ranks. About a press that sometimes misses the right tone. About memory, the only thing that cannot be sunk in concrete. The names Leslie, Kristen, and Tammy are not lines in a chronicle. They are addresses in our responsibility. As long as we build end-to-end data pipelines, rewrite protocols of doubt, and teach our kids to say no, this story keeps a meaning. Everything else is the silence after the tape.